Hey guys, welcome to day 29 of the Spark Change Challenge. 2 more days to go after this. I cannot believe it. Excuse me. Mm, off to a good start. Didn't even have time to mute that. My apologies. Mm, mm. Let's try that again. Welcome to day 29 of the Spark Change Challenge. And, excuse me. Uh, I can't believe it's nearly the end of August. That seems slightly insane. And I know I'm off to a good start. This is probably because, excuse me, I've just come off a 2 hour webinar. I was running the August Tools of the Trade webinar up until half an hour ago. So I think I may have pushed my voice a little bit much at the moment, considering I'm still on the tail end of a flare. But that's all right. We will get through. And this month's webinar has informed the topic for this evening. So we're up to relationships and connections. And as I said, we're getting into, for this last run through all the domains, we're getting a little bit deeper into all of them. And so it seemed like kismet, fate, whatever you like to call it. But the webinar that I did today was on grief and loss, specifically on pet bereavement, through the sort of lens of animal assisted therapy and everything that we know about animal assisted therapy, and how that informs how we can work with clients who might be experiencing pet bereavement, how we can help ourselves cope and manage better, plus our friends and families dealing with that kind of grief. And I've done a lot of different webinars over the years on grief and loss. It's something we spent a lot of time talking about in my role at IVF. When I was with, I did some guest lectures with the Australian Centre for Grief and Bereavement, and the thing that's always struck me is there's so many models, there's so many ways we have of trying to explain grief and loss in a cognitive sense, because we want to make sense of it, because it hurts and we don't like it and we don't want to feel it any longer than we have to. So if we can make sense of it, we can get through it faster. That's certainly been my experience personally. But I think I don't think there is a model that's ever going to explain it, or create a way for it to be okay. But I think there's lots of little things from all of the models, going back to Freud and his mourning and melancholia, that all up gives us an idea and gives us a way forward, and a way of traveling through the grief, and explaining why it is so hard and why it does feel so bad. So, and the thing that it has come back to for me is relationships, which is obviously the theme of tonight's video. And hopefully, what I've sort of pulled together in this might have some meaning for you when it comes to ending a relationship, whether it's the end of a relationship due to death, whether it's the end of a relationship due to a breakup or a separation, whether it's the end of a relationship due to changes in what both of you want, if it's the end of a friendship because one person's gone in one way and one's gone in another way. But we all encounter, we all have to deal with the ending of relationships. And I think the grief and loss literature can be kind of overwhelming and confusing when it comes to that. And I've come up with a relatively succinct quote or approach that I think definitely fits in with the relational theme of tonight, and that I hope might be of use to some of you when you're looking at relational loss. So this is what I've kind of distilled down. And obviously I know you can read the slide for yourselves, but I want to kind of just explain my thinking in a little bit more detail and see what you think. So I think that the process of working through a relational loss is the process of, expanding that life to fit the grief. The old models were you have life before, the loss happens, your whole life is taken up by the grief. And the theory was, certainly back in the 60s and 70s, that the grief shrinks over time and takes up less and less and less of your life. But what the newer models talk about, all in different ways, but really what I think they're getting at is that idea that it's not so much that the grief shrinks, it's that our life grows to expand around it. And I think the process of, or if you're working with someone with complicated grief and bereavement, it's that they're not getting into the life expansion phase. They're stuck in the entire life is filled with the grief. And I think it makes sense to me that one of the things that helps that life expansion, the other way that I talk about it sometimes is, if you've got one child, and people would sometimes say, oh, if I have a second child, how am I going to love them as much as I love the first child? And somehow your heart expands to feel that love. If you've got one dog, how am I going to possibly love another dog as much as it expands? And I think your life expands to fit the grief. The grief itself doesn't really change. The impact that it has on you doesn't change, but your life becomes you get into that life expansion. I can't see who is commenting, but I can see that someone from Facebook is commenting that it's a helpful way of understanding complicated prolonged grief. Yes, thank you. This is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping it makes sense. So the process of that life expansion part, that is the process of grief. And so you need to work through practical changes. If we're talking about pet loss, that might be, getting up and seeing that empty bowl, not taking them for a walk, having their leftover food to deal with. If you're talking about the end of a relationship, it might have, not having someone to go to chess club with, or I don't know why chess club came into my mind, but the practical changes of the new reality and what your world looks like now can in very, very simple, concrete, practical terms look very, very different. And we know our brains don't like change. It takes them a while to catch up to this new world, to this new reality. So you've got the practical changes, and then you have the emotional changes. And this is where things like, the Kubler-Ross 5 stages come into it, or the emotional aspects of the 2-track model or the dual process model. But it's that idea that, we're going to be sad, and we're going to be angry sometimes, and we might go into denial sometimes, and then there'll be a bargaining. As much as Kubler-Ross kind of went out of fashion, those 5 stages, yes, certainly not linear, and she never intended that they be linear, but those 5 stages definitely will show up at some point in a grief process. And that's okay, that those are emotional changes that need to happen, that are a part of creating that new world and that new relationship, finding a way to maintain the connection, maintain the relationship, but in a new way. You're different, the world is different, the relationship is different, but it is still significant. So it has to be in a way that makes sense to you, that makes sense to the relationship and the type of relationship that it was, and that has a new meaning and a new purpose, but connected to the old. So I suppose that's my relational model of grief processing. I don't think I'm stealing this from anybody. This was something that I've sort of come up by looking at all of the bits and pieces, and partly by spending so much time reflecting on and thinking about relationships, the relationship with ourselves, the relationships with other people, and just the profound impact that has on our attachments and on our resiliency. And then today doing this webinar, reflecting on it and thinking about, yeah, there's practical stuff, there's emotional stuff, but more than anything, there's that, I think, to get to the point where the grief is not the only thing that you see and the only thing that you feel anymore. At least in my experience, personally and professionally, there needs to be an ongoing relationship of some sort, whatever that looks like. And this is where things like, memorials, having pictures, having videos, having things to keep you connected. When we're working with kids and talking specifically about pet loss, we talk about the invisible leash, which is the pet loss version of the invisible string, but talking about that idea that that connection doesn't die with the person or the animal that you are connected to. It changes significantly and dramatically, but if you can find a way to make the new relationship have significance and meaning, then you're on your way to that sort of life expansion part of the grieving process. So I told you we were going to go deeper into all of these. I'll post that into the Tools of the Trade group and send it off into the email tonight. But yeah, I hope you find that useful. It's making a lot of sense to me, and particularly because when we get to the end of the challenge, Fridays, 1st of September, 1st of spring, the challenge will have been completed. But I think it might be a good time to talk about some of the changes to relationships and connections that'll be going on for me and for 12 points in the next year or so. And yeah, it does feel like all of this stuff, all of this small changes and small switches in focus have been leading very neatly to not a more comfortable relationship with self-care, but a more practical relationship with self-care, and a more like I don't know, it's kind of like the very first challenge that I did in Tools of the Trade was back in 2020, and it was getting used to just doing these kind of videos, because it's very, if you haven't done this before, it feels very weird to just talk to a camera on your desktop and there's no one interacting back with you, and it's all feels very strange. And it was suggested to me at the time that you should just do a video every single day. That was the alphabet challenge. So we did a resource for every letter of the alphabet throughout February, and they were shocking to start off with. It was really painful and awkward to watch back. It's kind of funny. But by the end of the month, it was just like, it's fine. And yeah, now I can do these relatively, like, it's fine. I don't know what it's like for my audience, but I don't have a problem with it anymore. And I think doing the self-care stuff this way, just making it an everyday thing, like a habit, it has actually made that all a bit easier. It is just something that's starting to automatically factor into my thinking. I noticed today I had half an hour between a client and the webinar starting, and normally I'd go in and I would check all of my slides were perfect, and I'd go in and make sure this video link is working and that this picture is right, and do I have another one that might fit better, and all that sort of stuff. And instead I sort of went, you know what, I think it's fine. I think I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe I'll go and actually have something to eat for lunch. And then I did a 10-minute meditation. Never have done that at the start of the month. No way in hell would I have done that. I would have been working on those slides till the last second. And I did the meditation, felt much better, much chiller going into it, even though talking about pet loss and bereavement for 90 minutes was not the funnest or the easiest thing in the world. I still had enough energy at the end of that to come in and do this um, and not feel like I'm completely wrecked. So I don't know how all of you have been going with it, because I did see today we hit 900 people in Tools of the Trade today. So awesome. Hello, you 900. I don't know how all of you are going with it. There's been quite a few people who have reached out and said that this challenge has been helpful to get them to think about things in different ways, and that they've applied some bits to their own lives. But I think it's something that I might have to do again down the track. I think it might be something that's good for me, but that also I really do feel like we're onto something here with this approach of making self-care just a habit that you don't have to think about, that doesn't take up that extra energy, that's not adding to the mental load. And I look forward to reflecting more on this over the next couple of days as we wrap up, and then sharing my big self-care news with you on Friday. Have a fabulous evening, everyone. Thank you for those who joined me live, and I will see you tomorrow night. Bye.